that won't turn around. We are that movement. I said we are that movement. They're gonna shake this country up. And if you don't know, you better ask somebody. If you don't know, you better ask somebody. Look at your neighbor and tell them real good. We are that movement. Gonna turn this nation around. We're gonna vote. I like we should. We're gonna vote everywhere.
See you too, Jonathan. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to have this conversation on tonight. Yes, so yes, we are trying to make sure everybody is signed up, marking their march, this 1,000 marches, talking to denominational leaders, hanging out with organizers on the streets, and we're really trying to educate, get people the tools and resources they need to lead marches in the streets and during early voting.
Shout out to the folks in Danville, Kentucky. It looked like they had a lively gathering the other night. There was a big crowd down in Atlanta just last night,
Bethel.
rallying folks at the Big Bethel AME Church. Folks are getting organized, and later this evening, right here on the Repairs Brief, we're going to get to hear from a couple of folks who are organizing marches in their communities. Dr. Brim, go ahead and tell people if right now you want to organize a march in your community, what's the first step?
First step, get your toolkit. Sign up to get your toolkit at breachrepairs.org. Once you sign up saying, yes, I'm going to lead, you'll get a toolkit, and then you'll get a link to mark your march. It gives you the step-by-step frequently asked questions that you'll need to know. It is anyone can lead a march, and we've made sure that your guide and your toolkits are able to give you the information that you need to lead your march. So first day early voting, it's there. Everything's there step by step on how to lead a march.
All right. Tonight, we're talking about the real problem of voter suppression. We partnered for the Repairs Brief with our friends at the Institute for Policy Studies, who are giving us good research, fact sheets on each topic that we tackle here. And you can go to the Repairs of the Breach website to get the fact sheet tonight on voter suppression. It's a important issue that we're diving into. And joining us now, we were just talking about getting out the vote events and traveling this country. Bishop Barber has been crisscrossing everywhere, coming to us now from somewhere in Delaware, I believe.
Wilmington.
Well, in Delaware, where people are connecting voting registration and mobilization to the, we believe, unjust killing of a young 19-year-old kid shot in the back, trying to get the truth out. And Jonathan, people are understanding that if you don't vote, you can't sit on juries. If you're not registered. If in the situations that we have around this country, people who we are concerned about how they prosecute cases are determined by votes. And last night we were in Atlanta with a packed house where the AME bishop of the 6th district of the AME church committed all of his churches to the 1,000 marches. And we talked about, Jonathan, how what really the battle is, because in Atlanta and Georgia, for instance, the number of poor and low wage voters that didn't vote, something like almost 1.5 million, number of African Americans, almost 800,000. But the margin of vote on the presidential side was less than 100,000 votes. Mm. And if you understand this, you understand why you got to listen tonight to Jonathan and Hannah and this data, right? We're trying to give you all the real deal. This is not just a black fight. That's not the voter suppression we're dealing with. It's an attack on voting itself, an attempt to undermine the democracy, suppress the vote, suppress humanity, but it's about power, pure power. That's why when you look at these various voter suppression things, the current bill that Trump wants through would hurt 66 million women. Now he's talking about he might call emergency elections. And if he does, it would take 2/3 of the Congress, both sides, to overturn it. And then today the Supreme Court says a state doesn't have the right to challenge his attack on mail-in voters. I doesn't know if that's going to be the final say. But we have to see this as something much broader than just an attack on African Americans or just a race issue. This is a humanity issue. It's a civilization issue. It's a future of the country issue. And at this point, Hannah, there's only really, while the lawyers may be fighting in the court, between now and November or the first day of early voting, like in October in North Carolina, the only thing people can do, but it's a powerful thing, is mobilize. Is bust the predictions open. If they're predicting 30% of the electorate to vote, if they're predicting 40% of the electorate to vote, we need to see 60%. We need to see lines like were around the buildings when Mandela first got out of. We really need to say this election, Jonathan, is the beginning of a massive 10 to 12 year push by people who have a vision for this democracy, not just a critique about what's happening, but if you're for living wages and healthcare and a just democracy and all those things, then this must be a sign and a signal, and it must be massive. And that's why we said last night, and interesting, each place we said, I'll stop here. We were in Kentucky the other day, and they committed 112 marches at least, one in every county, black and white people together. It happened in Georgia. And every time we said, listen, this is not about personality, it's about strategy. We don't need to be marching on Washington, taking a bunch of resources to D.C. We need to march on the polls to change Washington, change the state. The applause went up. I mean, people get it. It was in Newark, New Jersey. They said, thank you. And then it's not because anybody's mad with any personality. We're talking about strategy here. If you got $5,000, don't put it on a bus to go to D.C. Put it in vans and things to get people to the polls in your state. And then lastly, we must be conspicuous. People are afraid for various reasons. And if they see us together conspicuously, it'll be all over the news, but it also will give people the courage they need to join and come together. So we're serious about this 100 days, 1,000 marches to the polls, first day of early voting and beyond, because these are serious times. And this is, last night when I went through the 16 things that we are seeing happening simultaneously by authoritarianism, and then connected that to this theme, if we ever needed to vote, we sure do need to vote now. The spirit of the room was incredible. How we got to get the spirit of the room into the feet, into the organizing, into the mobilizing. And that's what the repairs brief is saying. If you're serious about facts and the future and fighting, come here, learn tonight about the power we have, not the power we trying to get, the power we have right now. And let's utilize that power.
Amen to that. I mean, one of the things that we know about authoritarians is that they try to use power to instill fear and to overwhelm people with the number of things that, they are doing with that power in order to make the people feel like they don't have power. And I think what's so important about this campaign is it's getting right to the power that people already have in our hands. And we're not just talking about what people did here, back in the 1960s to reclaim this power. We can look, as recently as the authoritarian movement in Hungary, where
That's right.
Orban had control of the whole regime, the whole government, and it was the people coming together and coming out in massive numbers that turned the tide against him. So we've seen that this is possible, but it takes a great deal of work. And one of the things that Bishop, you always remind us of is that whenever you see voter suppression, you know that those who are doing it recognize your power.
That's right.
Otherwise, they would
Yes.
never be fighting that hard to keep you from voting.
Yeah. Do you recognize it? And John, while I go into this rally to stand with this mother and father, and Hannah, as you all lead other folk, that's right, John. And it's the power. See, we don't. People say, well, the courts. There are things that are gonna work out in the courts. But right now, there's a singular thing we can massively do. And that is we can say we're going to mobilize and say, because we believe in this, this, and this, not just because of what we're against, that we are going to have this conspicuous, courageous, compassionate coming together for the sake of our civilization and democracy itself. And nobody can stop us from doing that but us. This is one of those things. Authoritarians cannot stop you from organizing a march from your barbershop or your salon or your church or your community or your housing development or your lodge or your organization. Nobody can stop you from doing that. The only thing that can stop us is us, and we're not going to stop us. We're going to mobilize us.
That's right.
That's it right there.
Y'all keep sending the fire. Keep sending fire. I'm going into this rally to stand with this family. But if you're not on right now, go get somebody and get them on the repair spree. God bless you.
Bless you, Bishop. Thank you very much. And please tell the family there that we're praying with them.
Yes.
We will indeed.
Dr. Broom, let's dive into these facts. I was saying right before Bishop joined us that the Institute for Policy Studies has created a fact sheet about the voter suppression tactics that we know something about. They're being deployed by the authoritarians who want to reduce the number of people who vote because they think that will increase their likelihood of staying in office. But a lot of these tactics and the efforts to change the system are based on lies, and lies that have been disproven and dispelled many times over. So let's go through these. These are on the fact sheet. You can download it from breachrepairs.org. But the first one here is this myth that has been told over and over again that says that mail-in voting is rife with fraud, right? If you can claim that somehow they're using fraud to get the numbers to increase through the mail, then that would be a reason to crack down on the mail-in voting. What have we learned, Dr. Broom, about what's really going on in terms of mail-in voting?
So that's one of those myths. They say one of the conspiracy theories, holds that ballots sent to deceased people are filled out by others. This, as they say, is extraordinary rare. It says one study says that Washington State's universal mail-in program found only 0.0003% of the ballots appeared to have been cast after the voter's death. That's, microscopic almost. Yeah. So that's one of the myths that they have. And it's funny, Jonathan, they're trying to find myths, and they were elected on the same election process.
So some of the people were, that's true. For those of us who don't live in a state like Washington that you were just talking about, let me just kind of spell out for people what that means. There are some states that have transitioned to mailing every registered voter a ballot, and then they have a certain amount of time to return that ballot. Washington is one, California is like that too. And what you were quoting is that there has been extensive research in these places where everyone is voting by mail to see how often it happens that someone uses somebody else's ballot. I don't know how many zeros you said. Was it 3, 4? It is extremely minuscule.
Yes. Yeah.
That's in a place where everyone is voting by mail. This is not the fraud. The so-called fraud is not a real problem. And let me tell you how we know. Over a decade ago, when the Supreme Court had gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. Now, this year we've had to deal with Section 2. We might talk about that a little bit later. But when Section 5 was gutted, states passed many voter suppression tactics that were about creating these barriers that make it more difficult for people to vote. And we sued in North Carolina, and they were using this lie about fraud back then. They said, we have to have these barriers to prevent the fraud. The fraud is going to bring our system down. And so we sued and went to court. And in court, the lawyers asked the state of North Carolina to produce evidence of the fraud that they had used to justify passing the bill. And in court, when they had the opportunity, they presented no evidence. So it was not a problem then, and it has not proven to be, here and there, every once in a very long while, somebody may slip through in one way. And many of the times when we've looked into those stories, it was an accident. It was not even intentional. But the fraud is a story that is created in order to justify the voter suppression tactics.
Yeah.
Let's look at another one on here. Voting machines are insecure. Part of the reason we want to go through these myths is because when people go out and talk to folks in their community about the importance of voting and the importance of getting out, there are a lot of folks who have, concerns and about the system and worry about whether if they go through the trouble, it's going to count anyway. And it's important to let people know what the facts are here. So this gets repeated, by the people who want to take over the elections, by people who are saying that we can't trust the results. But what do we know about the voting machines from the studies that have happened after recent elections, over and over again?
Right. There's no evidence that the voting machines manipulation has changed the outcome of a federal election. In reality, there are many guardrails to ensure secure. Voting machines are tested and certified by the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. And then most states require additional testing. So I always thought about, if it's so microscopic, why are the changes so massive? If it's so minute in finding these small places where there was an issue, then why such a massive over appeal of the voting rights changes? So it's been tested. It's been additionally tested. That's another myth. So it's almost like I got to create some type of chaos and then try to come up with a solution. But the solution is so massive that you're really regressing instead of progressing.
There you go. And the chaos is often the point, right?
Yes.
To stir up chaos, because that gives people who have power justification to consolidate that power. We've even heard this question asked to the sitting president right now about whether an emergency might be declared. He has on record threatened to declare an emergency if this so-called SAVE Act in the Congress doesn't pass. And again, that is a bill that is filled with measures that have been proposed to solve problems that don't exist.
Yes.
It's important to keep people focused on what the real issues are. And the biggest issue, I would say the two biggest issues in American elections are that working people who often have to get to work even before polls open, to not get home until after they close. One of the biggest obstacles is just for working people to have access to be able to get to a polling place and to have their voice heard. That's why many of us, for many years, advocated for early voting. Early voting is an opportunity, sometimes on the weekend or on a day off before Election Day, to go ahead and place your ballot, or to have expanded access to mail-in ballots so that, when you do get home from work, you have a chance to fill out your ballot and send it in ahead of the election. Those are means that we have tried to use to expand access to the ballot. And in so many ways, these voter suppression tactics that the myths and lies are used to justify are a way to try to roll back that access that has expanded, because people in power who want to abuse power find that when more people vote, they often don't win the elections that they're used to winning.
Right.
We've quoted many numbers here about the number of people, who didn't vote in the last election. And some of that, of course, is because of voter suppression tactics. Some of that is because of the second biggest issue in our elections, which is people say, well, I don't feel like my vote would make for any candidate on the ballot would make much of a difference. And in that sense, we do have the real challenge of needing to build a movement of people that vote and that can persuade, the people who are in power, to whoever ends up in power, to pursue an agenda that really could make a difference. The only way to build that kind of power is to build a movement that votes. And so that's why we're trying to dispel these myths and to have these thousands of marches to the polls to demonstrate that there is a will in this country for a different kind of future, and that anybody from any party who's going to run to represent this country is going to have some new and creative ideas for how to make life work here for everyone. Let's do one or two more of these. This one I think is incredibly important. It's also on the fact sheet. I've got the fact sheet right here. Again, you can download it at breachrepairs.org. But there's this myth, this lie that has been repeated over and over again about undocumented people voting. What are just the basic facts when it comes to the question of somebody who is in this country and not a citizen of this country actually showing up and trying to vote? What do folks need to know about that, Dr. Broom?
One study, I think it says 42 jurisdictions found that only now we're going to count the zeros, 0.0001%, 0.0001% of voters were flagged as even suspected of being a non-citizen that voted.
If I remember my math class right, that's 1/10,000%
That is correct. That is a very good conversion. That is correct. That is how microscopic, as they say, of the era in a non-citizen voting in an election. And yet
once you've gotten the lie out there, once you've gotten some people to believe that maybe that might be the case, then what do you see? You see people come along and propose these systems to purge voters from the rolls. What does that mean? It means this is why they've been trying to get the voter rolls from states, because there are people who've put together these lists of voters to match against the state voter rolls. And what we have found from many, many studies of these kinds of systems that have been around for a while is that there are far more mismatches of names. Y'all may have noticed there's only so many names that mamas and daddies give to their babies. And there are some of us out here that have names that are very similar.
Yes.
They say everybody has a doppelganger, but a lot of us have more than one other person who shares our name or something very close to our name. It's very easy for these electronic systems that try to match one list with another list to have false matches, and then people get cleared from voting rolls and show up to vote where they have always voted. Usually the people at the poll know who they are because they know them. We've had a long tradition of signature attestation. If you sign and say you are you to people in your community who know you as you and you're not you, that's a federal offense, a felony offense. And people understand that you can be prosecuted. Certainly, people who have been denied a path to citizenship and understand how precarious their situation is in many communities have long understood that it is far too great a risk to be part of some kind of scheme that I don't know how much you would have to pay somebody to be part of that kind of scheme, but I don't even think if you were paying people, you could get that many people to do it. I mean, it's just a very outlandish idea, but by sowing the seed of that lie, they have justified many, many things that are designed to, again, reduce the total number of people who vote. It seems like with all of these lies having a similar goal, it seems like there are forces that don't want you to vote. Dr. Broom, why do you think there are people out there who don't want everybody to vote in a country where this is supposed to be such a basic value? One person, one vote, something we all talk about and got taught in school. What is going on here with all of these lies? There are more lies on the fact sheet.
Realize.
Download it. You can learn them all, and you can talk to your friends about them. But let's get at the root of this. What is this about?
It's power. It's really about power. And it's a burden. It's a burden for even if you have ID, even if you have a car, even if you can't get off your job, it could be considered an inconvenience. But think about people who can't get off their job, that doesn't have transportation, that may not have a proper ID. Then it becomes a burden. And if it becomes a burden, then somebody is not going to vote. I don't want to have to go through all these hoops to vote. So the more burden you can do for an individual, the less likely there are to vote. And then those that have created these suppressive laws stay in power. And that is all it is power and control.
Mm.
It's not a democracy.
Mm.
They don't want that. They don't want people to have the right of rightful representation. They literally want you to be under their control by taking away the basic right of a citizen, and that's their right to vote.
Yeah. Yeah, that's voter suppression. Very closely aligned with voter suppression is something that usually gets called election subversion, the attempt to change the whole electoral process in a way that sets it up for one side or the other. We mentioned earlier that, the possibility of declaring emergencies, or some people have been concerned about possibly ICE or other law enforcement officers being deployed to polls in ways that might intimidate people. We're watching closely, and there are many groups that are watching closely to make sure that people in our communities know their rights and the rules about voting. But one thing that we have already seen that I think falls under election subversion is the wave of gerrymandering that has happened since the Calais decision from the Supreme Court. I mean, just to give people a little basic information about that, the court has allowed an irregular process of calling special sessions to redraw voting districts when voting districts are not usually redrawn, and to draw them now in ways that are clearly designed to make it more difficult for Black representatives from the South to win the districts that they represent right now. And that was a long court process that led to that decision. But once the courts opened the doors to that, we've seen states, especially across the South, do that. That kind of gerrymander is a bit of a gamble, because if you have someone who represents one area and you want to redraw the district so that they're less likely to win, you have to take voters from another place that you think is quote unquote safe for your party in order to do that. And all of those numbers, all of that math is based on the averages of how many people turn out to vote in a given election year. We know for some time in this country that not as many people vote in midterm years as they do in presidential election. And so a lot of the gamble, a lot of the math that's been done with these gerrymanders that Republican legislatures across the South have been eager to do because their belief is that they can gain seats by specifically taking away the seats that Black people have represented in parts of the South in what we call majority Black districts. Their gamble is that they had enough to borrow in other places. And one of the reasons why recognizing the power of infrequent voters is so important in a year like this is that in a midterm election year, it is not unusual for half of the people who are registered to vote to not vote. And that's the math that they're betting on. They're betting on half of the folks who could show up not showing up. It is entirely possible that a gerrymander can become what the political scientists who study this call a dummy-mander, a bet that doesn't get won, a bet that actually turns against the intentions of those who made it, if there is a 10 or 15% increase in the turnout of people who show up for those elections. And so if if we were talking earlier about how, these voter suppression tactics that are just an attempt to make it a little more difficult for you to vote, putting up barriers that you have to jump over, if that's not enough to get you fired up, think about the legislature in your state calling a special session to try to erase not just your vote, but the vote of your whole community. And this is an opportunity for communities who see that that is wrong to come together and build coalitions that can overcome that math by turning out in numbers that weren't expected when they did the gerrymander. That's what we have an opportunity for. So all of that is behind the strategy of 100 days, 1,000 votes that you have been leading, Dr. Broom. You have invited two folks who've taken up that charge to join us. Let me invite you to introduce them to join us here on the Repairs Brief.
Thank you, Jonathan. We have Mr. Chuck Williams. He is coming out of Maryland. And Mr. Andrew Schulman, he's coming out of DC. Did I get it right?
West Virginia.
West Virginia. Sorry, got you mixed up. And they are leaders of the march. They have come on to talk about why they have joined the movement. They have been with us since Moral Mondays and Public Pulpit. And so now they're going to be with us with 100 days, 1,000 marches. So thank y'all for joining us on tonight.
Yes, indeed. Chuck
Great to be here.
Chuck from outside of DC and Andrew from West Virginia.
West Virginia.
These are two very different parts of this country, but folks from all over are signing up, and this is something to remember. Elections happen everywhere. So let me start with you, Chuck. What made you decide to lead a march to the poll in your community?
Thank you. It made sense to do this when you look at all of the shenanigans that are going on between, as you just finished talking about, the Supreme Court decision on the mail-in ballots. We're looking at threats or rumors of ICE showing up. So there is a number of things that allowed me to say, well, we have to make certain that we can exercise this franchise to vote. Irrespective of the job that the current administration is doing, it's just in principle that you would think that you can block out votes in order to retain power. That is very disturbing in itself. So it became important that not only as I make a practice of voting in all elections, but it also made sense that we look at how do we motivate folks who may normally not come out to come out and exercise their right to vote.
That's so important. I mean, this notion that you have power not only to cast your vote, but to really motivate people to spread the word and to help people see that this is something important for the whole community to do. Andrew, how about for you? I mean, what has drawn you and your community to have a march coming into these midterms?
For me, it's a moral imperative, and this has been a learning process for me. I think we're in a spiritual crisis in our country right now, where there's one of the rabbis at one of the Moral Monday events named it as a culture of cruelty that has taken root in our government and in our polity. And so, at the Moral Monday events, I have been learning from Dr. Broom and Bishop Barber and taking inspiration from them. They speak a language of conscience and of disciplined, nonviolent moral action that just compels me to answer. And so, I'm just answering the call, and they sent out the call for people to lead marches. And I thought, is that me? I thought of all the reasons not to do it. And, I'm just a guy. I've never done this before. And then I thought of the part of the book of Exodus where God calls Moses to lead his people out of Egypt. And Moses argues with God. It's my favorite part of Exodus. He argues with God and he says, God, I can't do it. I'm just me. And God says, never mind about that. Go. So, we're going to raise our voices in West Virginia towards a moral vision, voting vision. And I don't know how many people are going to come. That matters. But what matters more is that we be seen and heard to lead change.
I love it. I love it. You've
Yes.
never done it before, but you know that it needs to be done.
Yes.
And you've said, here I am. I'm going to try it. But for both of you, as you've taken this on, I mean, I'm thinking that there's probably many people who have the same kind of thought, like, yeah, that's needed, but I'm not an expert in that. That's not my thing. What have you learned about the organizing that you could just tell somebody who might be sort of sitting on the fence, not sure if they can do it? What can you tell people has made you able to do it?
Well, Jonathan, for me, I'm sorry, Andrew, go ahead. You look like you're ready to jump in. I went first
You
last
go.
time.
You go.
You do it this time.
Okay. Well, for me, what I have learned is the power of leadership and of moral example. That is what I've taken from the Moral Monday events, is that they've come out and raised their voices and said that we cannot tolerate this, and we are going to be seen, and we are going to be heard, and we're going to raise a positive vision. And I was talking with my brother, who expressed to me his fear and his dejection, and about all the bad things that are happening. And I thought that is the power of moral leadership. It shows us that there is a way. And so, I'm just trying to carry that forward.
Thank you. How about you, Chuck?
Yeah, for me, well, two things. One is I should also mention that I serve on the Board of Elections for my county. So my role is training election judges. So going out to vote is very important for me. There was frustration because a lot of times when you're simply cheering and say, hey, get out to vote, and people are not responding, you have to find a way to be able to put your convictions into action.
Yeah.
And so by doing this, my hope is that we're able to motivate a number of people who ordinarily would not come out to vote, particularly in off-year elections, to come out to exercise their right to vote.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Broom, I want to make a case that the person who's never done it before, the person who thinks, I'm not sure this is my thing, is the most important person to lead a march to the polls if your goal is to reach infrequent voters.
Yes.
Because obviously the people for whom it is their thing have only reached a certain percentage of the population. Now,
Yes.
I'm grateful for all the people who regularly show up to vote. But if there are people who have not shown up, then clearly somebody else knows them. Somebody else needs to reach out to them. And if you've never done it before, you might be that person.
Yes.
Or 1 or 10 or 100 people in your community who need to hear why exercising their power could make a difference. I was talking to, I have a daughter in high school. I was talking to some of her friends not too long ago, and they said, well, we're not quite old enough to vote. And I said, that's true, but there's nothing to keep you from leading a march to the polls.
That is true.
Because a lot of people who this would be their first time voting, right? They just turned 18. And if you could help them get out to the poll and help and talk to your friends about why voting is important for people when they become 18 years old, then you've recruited a whole group of people who've never voted before. That could
Yes.
be one of the most important marches in your community.
I agree. Totally agree. That first person that I've never done this before, but I feel called to do it. I may not get it right. If I can take 5 people, that's 5 people that probably would have not even came to the poll or even voted. But because they saw you
Mm.
And they heard your passion to say, I've never done this before, but I'm doing this. I feel called. This is the right thing to do in this time. That's who, like you said, will be connected to someone else. I remember when I was just starting to vote, and I remember nobody came into our housing division to just have conversation about how voting affects who makes sure that I have a place to stay. Voting make sure that I have food to feed my children. Voting make sure of the funding that goes to my children's public education. Those are the conversations
Mm.
that this should be igniting. So I am saluting you, Chuck, and you, Andrew. May not have ever done this, but this is time for such a time as this. I am so thankful for you guys taking those courageous steps to say, I'm going to lead. And you don't have to just lead one. You can lead many within those windows.
Well,
That's
as they
right.
say, if you're not part of the solution, then you tend to be part of the problem. So I want to be part of the solution.
Yes,
Awesome.
indeed.
Awesome.
And let me just say one more thing that I think it's so helpful to organize and do this with a network of people who are doing it because one way that the organizing gets amplified is by just the very fact that there are going to be marches happening here, there, and everywhere being a story. Dr. Broom and I were part of a group that marched across eastern North Carolina in the primary election season back in the spring in one of these areas that had been gerrymandered. And so we wanted to draw attention to the fact that there had been drastic measures to try to take the power of these folks' vote. Well, this became a story not just on the news. I mean, it was on the news every night, the local news and on the radio. I actually came in from speaking somewhere else, and I got in one of these Ubers, and the guy asked me why I was going way out there in the middle of nowhere in eastern North Carolina. I said, well, some of my friends are out there leading the march, and he said, oh yeah, I just heard about it on the radio. So the word was getting out, by the local media, but what we found on the road was that the word was also getting out among neighbors. And before we would get to the next little town, people would come out on their porches and there was a conversation about why are these people marching? What are they marching for? I mean, the heart of democracy, of course, has to be that if the people are going to have a voice, the people have to talk to one another about why, what matters to us and why we're showing up. And a march to the polls is a great way to get that conversation going in your community. So big thanks from me and Dr. Broom and everybody at Repairs the Breach to both of you for taking this on and for joining us tonight, because you've set an example that others can follow.
Yes.
And thanks for sharing a little bit about what the journey has been so far.
Absolutely.
Dr. Broom, we're coming to the end of our Repairer's Brief, but let me give you a chance to have a parting word here.
Wow. They say that justice never rolled down automatically. It says somebody had to clear the channel. So we are clearing the channel so that justice does roll down. And so I'm thankful for channel cleaners as we are allowing justice to roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream.
There you go. That's a great ancient vision from the prophet, but one that has echoed through the history of this country and that we need now. Channel cleaners.
Yes.
So that healing waters can flow in our communities. And they say for there to be a river, there have to be many, many tributaries that flow down from the hillsides into the creeks and the creeks into the streams and the streams into the river. And we want these thousands and thousands of marches to be those tributaries that bring us into a mighty river that helps us to reconstruct democracy in this country. If you're listening tonight, we believe that you are one of the people who can make that river happen, just like Chuck, just like Andrew, just like Hannah, just like me. We're people working together to reconstruct this democracy. It's a gift to be with you all. And we will be back in 2 weeks with the next episode of the Repairer's Brief. Please join us. Share the word about this. You can stream it live on YouTube or Substack. You can find it by tomorrow morning, within a few hours. It takes a little time for the systems to process these things, but you can find it wherever podcasts are downloaded. Always, you can go to breachrepairers.org to download the fact sheet that we are producing in partnership with our friends at the Institute for Policy Studies. And thanks, as we're concluding, to the Save America movement for helping us to get all the folks on the same screen, get everybody on the same microphones in the same stream so that this particular tributary can contribute to that river. Good to be with
Awesome.
you all tonight.
Yes.
Blessings.
God bless.